The views and opinions of the following show do not necessarily reflect the views and opinions of News Talk 1450 WOL, Radio 1 Incorporated, or their management.
This is Montgomery Mosaic on 1450 WOL, WPRS, HD2, and worldwide on WOLDCnews.com. Montgomery Mosaic features topics of interest to Montgomery County residents, businesses, and visitors. Here now is your host, Deborah Milo.
Good morning, County friends, and welcome to another Montgomery Mosaic. I'm your host, Deborah Milo. I hope you're having a great day so far and enjoying the beautiful weather. As you know, a goal of Montgomery Mosaic is to inform the community and highlight organizations and initiatives within the county which help minority communities do positive things. And the Montgomery County My Brother's Keeper is no stranger to inspiring positive change. Let me give you a little bit of a background about My Brother's Keeper. In February 2014, President Obama launched the My Brother's Keeper initiative, which came about based on a one-year progress report from the My Brother's Keepers Task Force, which says that the president encouraged candid dialogues around the country and a greater sense of responsibility among community leaders and young people themselves to put all youth in a position to thrive, regardless of their race, gender, or socioeconomic status. Well, today my guest is Michelle Taylor, and she's a member of the steering committee of the Montgomery County My Brother's Keeper. She's going to talk about the report which was released, which focuses on basically connecting youth to opportunities. And later during the show, we'll talk with Elijah Wheeler, coordinator for the Montgomery County My Brother's Keeper, about an upcoming event called the Day of Action, which takes place on April the 30th. Michelle, welcome to Montgomery Mosaic. I'm so glad you could join us today.
Good morning, Deborah. Thank you for having me.
You know, I'm sure our listeners are just as eager as I am to hear how you connected with My Brother's Keeper. I'm always interested in the backstory, and when I hear listeners out in the community, they tell me the same, like, ask your guests about how they came to be, to where they are. So talk a little bit about how you got connected with My Brother's Keeper.
Okay. Well, Deborah, just as a bit of background, I am the president and CEO of Beta Associates Incorporated, which is based here in Rockville, Maryland. Mm-hmm. And we are a professional services firm that provides an array of services from communications, research and evaluation, technical assistance and training to federal, state, and local government agencies. Mm-hmm. And we tend to focus on issues that address health, education, and safety as it relates to vulnerable and underserved populations. So with that, about a year ago, I was approached by the Community Foundation for the National Capital Region and Montgomery College to work with them in conducting a study looking at the state of disconnected youth in Montgomery County, and specifically Black and African American youth. Mm-hmm. And by disconnection, we're talking about those young people who are neither connected to school or work. So they are not in school and they are unemployed. And we really wanted to look at what were the needs that they had in order to be connected, and what were some of the factors that contributed to them becoming disconnected from school and the workforce.
Oh, wow.
So with that, we embarked on, it was about a 6-month to 8-month process, mm-hmm. quite an undertaking in a short amount of time to really, obtain rich data that would help support the findings. But I'm pleased to say that we achieved our goal. We set out to reach over 1,200 youth, and that consisted of over 400 high school students, high school graduates, and 400 young people who had dropped out of high school. And what we hope to achieve, we decided not to do your traditional survey model, which had adults going out and approaching young people.
Oh, yeah.
Beta, we actually hired over 25 young people, so we would have a peer-to-peer engagement model where we trained them to go out and engage their peers and social networks in addressing the things that mattered most to them. So we did have a comprehensive survey that was developed actually by a Latino organization early on. They did a similar study first, and we mirrored the study based on some of the questions that they had performed in the survey as well, because the goal was to look at both what was happening with youth within the Hispanic community as well as youth within the Black and African American community. So we had a foundation of a survey to work from, and we went out and had the kids interact with other young people and just to complete this survey.
Right.
And as a result of the information, we were able to really gather some concrete findings as well as present recommendations for the county's consideration in how to really address what is happening.
So let me ask you, Michelle, in compiling the report, such as how long it took to find and interview the youth, because you're right, this was definitely a very significant undertaking. How long did it take you? What was the kind of timing that it took you to find and interview the young people involved?
It really was about a 6-month window. We trained and hired young people, I want to say, within a 30-day window, and then they had approximately 2 to 3 months to go out and survey their peers. And then we had another 2 months the research team took the data that was compiled, analyzed it, and developed the findings and the subsequent report.
Girl, that's a lot of work.
Yes,
that is a lot of work.
It was an accelerated research process,
I'm
which
sure.
actually was quite unheard of. And the research team, I'm not a researcher, but the research team, we had really high-level, highly qualified evaluators and researchers who supported this, and they were very clear that we had to maintain the same standards of integrity and data collection that any research project requires. So they were a little overwhelmed with the accelerated goal, but we did meet it.
Well, tell me something. What do you feel was the biggest surprise or revelation found from this research? And I know we talked about this in the green room earlier, and the statistic that you shared with me surprised me very much.
Well, Deborah, there were many important findings, but the one thing that stood out for most of us is, the way in which our young people are encountering law enforcement. It was really surprising. You want to think that Montgomery County is this, very accessible place where equity and social justice problems don't exist.
True.
But we were surprised to find that of the young people that we surveyed, both male and female had at some point or another come in contact with the police. And in looking at the percentages, 31% of the high school students surveyed had said that they had been stopped by the police. These are kids that are in school, on the track to perhaps graduate and go on to secondary education.
Yes.
And then there were 64% of youth who dropped out that said that they had also been stopped by the police.
And this is this is 31% of high school students?
Yes, that were surveyed.
That were surveyed. My goodness,
and
that's significant.
It is. And 64% of those we surveyed who had dropped out had been stopped by the police. And those who had dropped out were twice as likely to have been arrested or placed in detention or jail in their young lives.
So this is additional, data, like you mentioned, that tells the whole story.
Yes. Yes.
Listeners, good morning. It's Deborah Milo with Montgomery Mosaic on 1450 WOL. Today's guest is Michelle Taylor with the organization My Brother's Keeper here in Montgomery County. And Michelle has some interesting information, especially some statistics that I want you to listen to, so I hope you're leaning in to listen. Michelle, let me ask you, overall, do you think that black youth here in Montgomery County are optimistic about their futures? And do you think that it varies depending upon where they grew up or attended school? Right.
Well, Deborah, let's take the first part. Do I feel that youth are optimistic? Just in the encounters that I had with our survey administrators, who, again, were young people themselves, as well as those that they surveyed, it varied. I want to say that overall, when you look at the high school students,
right.
they're on a bit of a different trajectory.
Right.
So there might be a bit more of a sense of hopefulness and
right.
Preparedness in terms of their academic pursuits and ultimate professional goals. However, in the survey, nearly 30% of those who participated reported feeling sad or hopeless.
Sad or hopeless?
Right. So
with no options in their own mind.
Correct. So when you hear that 30%, that's so large a number.
Huge.
And, when you look at nationally what's going on in terms of mental health and suicide rates among our youth, Montgomery County really doesn't live in a bubble. I mean, when you look at 30% of our young people feeling sad or hopeless, you really do have to wonder how optimistic they really are feeling about their futures.
And, we see so much within the media, too, about things like teen suicide. Mm-hmm. We see so much in the media about, young people across the country, like you said, and like the study talks about as well. It gives references to young people who feel as though, look, what's the point? Mm-hmm. I mean, I've actually seen interviews on programs or, watched YouTube videos about young people who feel as though that their lives don't have any worth or value. Mm-hmm. So couple that with what you're saying about the statistics being so high that it's astounding. That's all I can tell you. It's astounding. So with that, do you think that the public school system work to promote student engagement and academic achievement?
In terms of what we found as far as recommendations relating to what MCPS could be doing,
right.
Student engagement and academic achievement are very important. And one of the recommendations really revolves around leadership diversity and cultural competency.
Now, wait, let me stop you there real quick. Leadership diversity. Expound upon that just a bit.
Well, just looking at the landscape of our school system and the teachers and educators that are there, the youth really felt that there was a lack of diversity in terms of who is instructing them and guiding them. So they really felt that if there were more individuals who had the cultural sensitivity and competency that could relate to them and understand some of the experiences that they may have beyond the classroom, that might be helpful as well. So really wanting to increase the diversity of our educators.
So in other words, students that have teachers and educators that look like them.
Correct.
Helps them to want to achieve more.
Correct. And just that they feel that they are being understood.
And you hear that when you hear students. I had a chance to attend the United Negro College Fund event last year, where we had speakers that actually talked about students coming out of predominantly white schools, or going into HBCs, and they felt so much more of a connection with the African American instructors and professors. So I do understand that.
Yes. Another area in terms of student engagement, there are increased desires to have increase in safety as far as anti-bullying and anti-violence programs within the school, and to increase connectedness with students.
Okay, then. You know what? We're going to come back with more information, Michelle, because you're sharing such impactful insights about the important work of the study and how My Brother's Keeper will make a difference. Folks, you're listening to Montgomery Mosaic on 1450 WOL, and when we come back, we'll talk with Elijah Wheeler for the Montgomery County My Brother's Keeper. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back.
14
Montgomery County My Brother's Keeper. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back.
1450 WOL.
Good morning. This WOL Traffic Update is brought to you by the Foundation for a Better Life. It was an accident on 16th Street Northwest near Belmont Street. Look for police on the scene. Southbound 295 is slow from Burroughs Avenue down to Pennsylvania Avenue. Accident Eastern Avenue between Minnesota Avenue and Kenilworth Avenue near Olive Street, with police still on the scene at that one. Winston Churchill's words stirred his country in the face of defeat. Today they inspire us to reach for our own victories. Commitment, pass it on. From the Foundation for a Better Life at values.com. Now your WOL weather forecast. Brought to you by WesternUnion.com's mobile app. For today, sunny, a high near 60. Clear overnight tonight, down to 41 for low. Tomorrow, sunny, a bit milder, a high near 64 degrees. You might be stuck in traffic, but your money won't be. Send money around the world 24/7 with the Western Union mobile app. Next time you need to send money fast, get out of a jam and tap the Western Union app. It's money. Steve Hirschhorn for News Talk 1450 WOL, where information is power.
Welcome back, listeners, to Montgomery Mosaic here in beautiful downtown Silver Spring. I'm your host, Deborah Milo, and before we went to break, I had the opportunity to have Michelle Taylor, a steering committee member from the Montgomery County My Brother's Keeper, and now we have the privilege of having Elijah Wheeler with he's actually the coordinator for the My Brother's Keeper in Montgomery County, and when he walked in, we were just surprised to see him because the man is running from one meeting to another. So, Elijah, welcome to Montgomery Mosaic.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
No problem. We thank you for coming on today's show. And, of course, I have to start with the life question is what I call it. And I talked to when Michelle was here earlier, I talked to her about that as well. What motivates you to work in the youth justice reform?
Well, I think it on some level is somewhat inherent for me. Being born and raised in Cleveland, having the opportunity to have...
We're not going to have that conversation.
Yeah. I know you're a native Columbus resident. So,
we have to talk about that later.
Yeah, definitely. But, having worked in this realm one way or another throughout my professional career, starting off first, having done some social work back home, then transitioning into education, teaching alternative and special education, primarily to youth of color, and seeing the disproportionalities there, I think is kind of what laid the groundwork for me to get to this point now.
Of course. I can understand that, believe me. So let's talk specifically about My Brother's Keeper and its mission.
Definitely. So, My Brother's Keeper, and I think Michelle gave somewhat of a background, and Deborah, I heard you earlier kind of give the overview.
Yes.
Is meant to create opportunities or pathways to success for young men and boys of color. Now, we've done something a little different here in Montgomery County. We've expanded that to young women and girls of color as well, too.
Oh, I see.
Because if you look at the statistics or the data, it bears out that they're facing some disparate treatment as well. And if we're going to talk about treating or dealing with the entire community, I think it's important to keep everyone in mind and not just one segment. But there are 6 milestones, which are essentially ensuring all youth enter school cognitively and socially and emotionally ready, ensuring all youth read at grade level by 3rd grade, ensuring all youth graduate from high school, ensure all youth complete post-secondary education or training, ensure all youth out of school are employed, and ensure all youth remain safe from violent crime. What we've done here in Montgomery County is based upon the data largely compiled in Michelle's report that she spoke to earlier.
Right.
Let's focus in on, or decided to focus in on 2 specific milestones, which are ensuring all youth graduate from high school and ensure all youth remain safe from violent crime. Those were 2 issues that we found via the data, and also from the feedback that we got from the youth were the 2 issues that impacted them the most, that they were most highly concerned about. There's an old saying, not about us, without us.
Not without us, that's right.
So I thought that it was very important, the work that Michelle did, and the way that she did the research by having youth go out and speak to their peers around these issues.
That was especially impactful in my opinion, because very rarely, unfortunately, going through school, SurveyMonkey was something that was not definitely an option. But of course, having the young people do that, I thought was very impactful.
Definitely.
So talk about what it took to accept President Obama's challenge.
Well, it didn't take much. We essentially went to County Executive Leggett and said, "Harry, this is something that we need to do. We're already doing the work, so to speak. But let's get it on paper and say that we accept this challenge and want to put it out there for everyone else." Also as a means to look at our partners, locally, Prince George's County and Washington, D.C., and say, we know that we're all doing the work, but let's accept the challenge that the president has laid out. Typically what we see with these kinds of missions is that there's some money or financial promise that's put out first, and then people kind of gravitate to it. But what was different this time with President Obama was that he said, look, I'm not going to necessarily promise you money beforehand. I want to see that you have some skin in the game first and that this is really important to you and your jurisdiction, and then we can talk about money down the line.
Because that's the kind of man he is.
Exactly.
I get
exactly.
that.
Put up or shut up.
Put up or shut up.
That's right.
This is Montgomery Mosaic on 1450 WOL with your host, Deborah Milo. Today's topic is about the Montgomery County My Brother's Keeper, and my guests are Elijah Wheeler and Michelle Taylor, and we're having a fantastic discussion about this, listeners. So I hope you're keeping up, because this is real and this is important. So talk about some of the critical issues facing African American men, and now you said girls as well, and how My Brother's Keeper is helping. Let's start with the young men make better life choices.
Well, I think that one of the most critical issues that we're seeing here in Montgomery County, as well as nationally, but specifically here in Montgomery County, is lack of educational engagement.
Yes.
When we start talking about things such as the achievement gap, which I'm not a really big proponent of, that phrase that's used, I don't believe that there's an achievement gap. I think there's an opportunity gap for our young men and boys of color. We see that as being a really critical issue. When you have young men and boys of color who attend schools with teachers and staffs or administrations that do not look like them, that are not representative, demographically speaking, of communities that they're familiar with, that's a problem.
It is a problem. Michelle and I just talked about that.
Yeah, that's a big issue, and that's not to say that MCPS is not a good school system. It's great. Obviously, statistics bear that out. We're always in the top 5 nationally every year, as in terms of public schools in the nation and that kind of thing, and that's all well and good, but when we start looking at things such as suspension rates and rates of arrest, and we see that overwhelmingly, even though our young men and boys of color only make up around 19% of those students in school, however, they account for close to 75 to 80% of those who are arrested and or suspended. That's a big issue that we have to address.
That's daunting.
It is, but we can no longer continue to turn a blind eye to it and act as if it's not happening. There are some issues of institutional and systemic bias that still exists in 2016 that we have to address and have some real honest conversations about.
That's right.
Otherwise, we'll be having these very same conversations in 16 years from now.
And we don't want that to happen.
Not at all.
I want to talk about the upcoming event. Let me shift gears here just a bit. I want to talk about the upcoming Community Day of Action. What's the goal of the event?
Well, the goal is, to get everyone in the same place. Typically, when we do this kind of work, we see that it's done in silos. Montgomery County is huge.
Yes.
And certainly, I don't think there's a shortage whatsoever of resources, but there's a shortage of collaboration, and that's the issue. So I think the primary goal, is to get everyone in the same place, to begin to talk about not only the issues that we know exist, but possible solutions that can be achieved and break down those barriers through collaborative efforts that can be put together so that we can make sure that we're really addressing these issues and not doing it in these little siloed kind of ways, but doing them collaboratively as a community. I think it's also an opportunity to get community members there.
Absolutely.
A lot of times what happens is that, we get ourselves in the room, those of us with titles that sound really important, and we sit around these tables and we talk about them.
Michelle, I just talked about that.
And it's so true.
Yeah.
We sit back and we talk about them. And, it's elitist for one.
Very much so.
Yeah, it's very disconcerting. And typically them or they aren't at the table to talk about their issues. So this is an opportunity for them, those other folks, those young people in the community, to be at the table with us as we start to propose solutions to some of these barriers.
So now, are there going to be, I want to make sure I understand this correctly so our listeners can understand it well, too. Are there going to be speakers, workshops, performances? Lay out the platform, so to speak.
So, yes, there will be speakers. What I've done at this point, and I think what we've done as a steering committee, is made sure that we were really kind of short on the speaker area of the agenda, because people are used to having somebody talk to them. So we do. Or at them,
right.
Or at them, and that's problematic within itself. So there will be a few speakers early on in the agenda just to kind of frame MBK for the day, but more importantly, there will be breakout sessions around specific areas of importance.
That's what I wanted to know.
Where everyone will be in the room together to talk about these barriers and possible solutions.
And see, that's the information I wanted to know. If you're just getting a chance to tune in, this is Montgomery Mosaic on 1450 WOL, airing from beautiful downtown Silver Spring. This is your host, Deb Milo, talking, and we have having a great conversation with Elijah Wheeler of the Montgomery County My Brother's Keeper, as well as Michelle Taylor, who is a steering committee member, and we're talking about the actual Community Day of Action. Elijah, is there a website that our listeners can visit to get more details?
So that's under construction.
Got it.
As we speak, we're putting all that together. But by any means, if anyone out there listening would like to attend and would like further information, they can reach me at area code 301-354-4917.
Okay, folks. 301-354-4917.
Or feel free to email me at Elijah, first name lowercase, and that's spelled biblically, just so people know. I know people spell their names differently now.
That's true.
Elijah.Wheeler, WHEELER, at collaborationcouncil, all one word, .org.
And I'm going to ask you to repeat that.
Sure, that's Elijah.Wheeler at collaborationcouncil.org.
So, Elijah, lastly, what do you envision for the Montgomery County sector of My Brother's Keeper?
That's a big one.
I know it is, but you know, brother, I have to ask.
I know. You know, in all honesty, what I envision is people coming together and really accepting that there are some big barriers and issues that are facing communities of color in 2016 in Montgomery County. You know, quite often we talk about how beautiful Montgomery County is, which it is.
Yeah.
How relatively rich and affluent it is, and all these great adjectives and superlatives to describe it, which it is. But I can tell you that someone woke up today with having a different vision of Montgomery County than those adjectives that I just used to describe it. Someone woke up today worried about whether or not they'll be able to eat a meal this evening, worried about whether or not that suspension that's on their record will stop them from getting into the prospective college it is that they're looking at, or even the armed forces or military.
That's right.
Someone woke up this morning wondering what it is that they're going to do if they're stopped on the way home by law enforcement, and how they're going to react to that. And so this is a reality, folks, in 2016 for communities and people of color. And so what I envision for MPK is that we can honestly come together and say that this is an issue, and we've got to do something to address it.
Well, Elijah and Michelle, this has been so insightful, and I can't thank you enough for spending some time with us today and talking about My Brother's Keeper. County friends, that's all we have time for today, and I'd like to thank both my guests for coming, and of course, thank you for sharing a part of your day. Now listen, don't forget to check out the Community Day event on April 30th at Clifton Park Baptist Church in Silver Spring. And Elijah gave his phone number as well as his email address. Don't forget to tune in again next month for another Montgomery Mosaic on 1450 WOL, WPRS HD2, and worldwide on WOLDCnews.com. Till next time, County friends, make it a positive day.
1450 WOL.
You've been listening to Montgomery Mosaic, featuring topics of interest to Montgomery County residents, businesses, and visitors. For more information or a copy of the show, email public information at montgomerymd.gov or call 240-777-6507. Be sure to tune in at this time on the second Wednesday every month for Montgomery Mosaic on 1450 WOL, WPRS, HD2, and worldwide on WOLDCnews.com.